Every NFL team has a different trajectory. Some teams are looking for a playoff run, whereas others are trying to build towards the future. So in today's video, I want to go through every single NFL team and look at whether or not their future is bright or if it's a bit more scary. Hit the like and subscribe button if you guys do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So we are on the tier list right here, and I have 5 different categories: very bright, middle of the road, uncertain, and scary future. I feel like the categories are pretty self-explanatory, but as we go along, I'll explain for each individual team. And we are going to begin with the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, they kind of hit the reset button this year. They've made some moves that were still kind of questionable, like signing Justin Reed when he's in the middle of his prime. You also made the Chase Young re-signing and a couple moves that were kind of questionable, but they also hit the reset button at quarterback. Derek Carr retired, so that kind of made the decision for them. They now have the youngest head coach in football. They have 2 very young quarterbacks, and they're looking to potentially have a top 5 pick in this year's draft. Now, in terms of like a future, it's not very bright because their cap situation is still kind of in the mix. And when you look at this team, they do have a lot of older players they need to shed off their books. So I'm not going to put them in very bright. I'm going to probably put them in more like middle of the road or uncertain, just because when I think of a team that's in the very bright or bright category, I would think of a team that has a ton of capital, a ton of assets, and a ton of money. And that's not really what's happening with the Saints. So for now, I'm going to put them in uncertain, just because while we know where they're heading, it's not really sure if it's going to be a bright future yet. We just have to kind of see what their draft picks and how the roster develops. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins, and I'm going to have to put them in scary future. I know the season has been turned around for this team, and they have been actually kind of a good football team the past few weeks. But I do believe the Miami Dolphins are heading towards what looks to be a bit of a reset. Not a full reset, but kind of a reset. Potentially a new head coach, a new starting quarterback. And when you look at this team, they don't just have a ton of draft capital and assets and money to just throw around and rebuild the roster. They have different avenues they can go down, and they definitely don't have, a just horrendous outright future. But with how it's looking right now, it's definitely uncertain to scary future. And given the fact that you are probably going to have to reset quarterback and head coach, potentially, we'll see what McDaniels does the rest of the way, that makes it to me pretty scary. Next is Baltimore, and I'm going to put them in middle of the road. Their future isn't bleak because as long as you have Lamar Jackson, you're looking really good. But at the same time, this is a roster that's going to have some turnover the next couple years of some of the older guys kind of phasing out, and you're going to have to bring in the new pieces and continue to build your roster around Lamar. But again, as long as you have Lamar, your future is very bright and you have a really good chance of winning. But surrounding Lamar, you're going to have to kind of retool the roster a little bit. Not that this team is very old, but there are some older players like, for example, Roquan Smith and Kyle Van Noy and some of your offensive linemen that you're going to have to continue to replace and develop. And so far this year, it hasn't been the greatest of years, but they're turning their season around. They do have a chance to make a playoff run. And I think for the future, they're going to be a really good football team. Next is Cincinnati Bengals, and I got to put them in scary future. And this is for a number of reasons. For starters, your ownership is one of the cheapest and, frankly, one of the worst in football. And as long as you have those guys running your team, you're always going to have a bit of an uncertain future. You also look at this roster and it's very top heavy, where it's Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and that's really it, because they're going to get off Trey Hendrickson, who was the one redeeming thing about your defense. And sure, you're not like a horrendous roster everywhere, but you have multiple big time holes and not a ton of money to spend. And this team is not just flooded with draft capital either, right? So as long as you have Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, you're always going to be very handicapped with what you can do in free agency. And this team is not like notorious for being this excellent drafting team. The Joe Burrow pick and Jamar Chase pick were kind of the obvious ones. Like, you could have picked Chase or Sewell, that either one would have worked, but they would have both hit. But since then, the Miles Murphy thing hasn't worked out. We'll see if Shamar Stewart works out. Some of the guys in the secondary have been kind of hit or miss. This is not a team that I feel really good about their future. All right, next up, the Denver Broncos, and I'm going to put them in very bright. It's a fairly young football team that has a young rookie quarterback who, while not having the greatest of second years, you can clearly tell that he is a good enough quarterback, and Sean Payton likes him a lot. So you have your franchise quarterback, at least you think. You also have a really good head coach. You have a relatively younger roster with a ton of talented pieces on both sides of the field. And you're not necessarily super hard capped either with the salary cap, because when Bo Nix does get paid, you're going to have to rework contracts, but you have 2 more years of Bo Nix on a rookie deal. so that way you can continue to surround him with more talent. We saw that this year. They're currently 9-2 and have a great chance of making a deep playoff run. Like, the Broncos' future is unbelievably bright, which is crazy to think about because just a few years ago when Russell Wilson was on the team and they had to cut him, and it was like, my days, they're paying him $80 million or whatever it was to not play on the team. Now you look at the team and they have completely rebounded around that, and the decision to get off the Wilson contract was just brilliant at this point. Next, I got the New York Giants, and I'm going to put them in bright. Now, the head coaching situation is not ideal, but I think they're giving Kafka a really good chance to prove himself, and so far, I think he's actually done a decent job, so we'll see if he can ultimately get that position, the head coaching role. But if you look at this team, in theory, you have your starting quarterback, you have your wide receiver 1, you look to have an RB1, and you have some pieces on both sides of the field you feel really good about. Now, you got to hire a new defensive coordinator. You probably need some help in the secondary, and maybe another offensive lineman would be nice. But when you look at the roster, it's a really solid roster, and they have a decent bit of money to go around and spend on, different pieces. Now, they do have some questions to answer this offseason, specifically with Jermaine Illuminor. Do they give Kayvon Thibodeau a contract extension? Those are some looming things they got to figure out. But assuming they bring back Illuminor and assuming they bring back Kayvon Thibodeau, it's a really talented football team that just feels like it needs that coach to get them in the right direction. And in addition to that, because of how bad this year has been for them, despite being really talented, they're going to end up with the top 10 pick. So hypothetically speaking, you can now add a Caleb Downs. You can add a Ansor Delane, Jermon McCoy, Spencer Fano, somebody on this team to make the team that much better and that much younger and building towards the future. So I like where this team is at. They also have a young quarterback on a rookie deal, which makes life a lot easier in terms of salary cap. So the Giants have a bright future. Next is the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm going to have to put them in uncertain, which is crazy to think about because had you asked me this question last year, it probably would have been very bright to bright. But JJ McCarthy has looked so bad at starting quarterback, and I get it. He's a young quarterback that we have to give time, but are we going to give him next year? Because he has been so bad this year. He has showed basically nothing, and I just have a, kind of a feeling that the Vikings might have to reset at quarterback yet again. Let's not forget the Vikings last year had Sam Darnold on their team, and Seattle, I mean, they love that guy. Like, Seattle has a great quarterback in Sam Darnold, and the Minnesota Vikings let him walk in favor of JJ McCarthy. Now, the good news is they're having a bad year. They're going to be in position to maybe have a top 12 pick this year. So they're going to be able to add even more talent on what is already a really loaded roster. But as long as this team doesn't have their quarterback situation figured out, they're just going to continue to just be this kind of floating on top of water team where they're talented, they'll be competitive, but they don't have the quarterback. So unless McCarthy can completely turn it around the rest of the season, or I don't know, maybe they give him next year to turn it around, I would imagine the Vikings might be in the business for a quarterback this offseason, and that makes my future a lot more uncertain because of how important the quarterback position is. Next up, the LA Rams. I'm not going to put them in very bright because Stafford is going to retire very, very soon. Maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after. So I'm just going to put them in bright. This team is in a very, very good situation, though, right? The only reason why they're not in very bright is because their possibly peak quarterback is looking to retire here within the next 2 or 3 years. But if he plays for 5 more years, then hell yeah, very, very bright. This team has 2 first-round picks this year, and it's crazy to think about this, but they have 2 first-round picks, and they might win the Super Bowl. Like, they truly might win the Super Bowl this year. They are definitely one of my favorites for sure. And they're going to have 2 first-round picks, one in which is the Atlanta Falcons pick, and that Falcons pick is going to be super valuable because the Falcons are not very good this year. So the Rams are going to have potentially a top 10 pick and then another late first-round pick in addition to what they already have. So you look at this roster, not a ton of big needs. They could use some offensive tackle help maybe and potentially a bigger, more physical CB1 corner. But that's really their only big needs. Other than that, you might want to draft a quarterback to, have a safety net for when Stafford does retire. And maybe you could use another receiver because Devontae Adams' career is starting to dwindle down. And he only has, I think, 1 more year left on his deal after this one. So maybe you want to look towards a future replacement there. But I mean, that's kind of nitpicky. This Rams team is in such a great spot. The only reason why they're not in very bright is because their franchise quarterback, who is going to be a future Hall of Famer, might retire soon. But yeah, they're an awesome team. I really like this Rams team. Next up, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm going to put them in middle of the road or bright. I think I'm going to put them on top of middle of the road just because the team is really good. But the injuries this year have obviously brought them down. But even if they were fully healthy, I just don't know if the Buccaneers, as currently constructed, are championship caliber. And so that kind of leaves them in a weird spot where it's like, okay, you have your franchise quarterback. There's some uncertainty with your head coach, but you have a lot of really good pieces. Bucky Irving, Emeka Egbuka. You got some guys on the offensive line you feel really good about when they're healthy. And defensively, you have some young guys in the secondary. And you got some guys in the defensive line that you want to build around. There's things to like about this Bucs team, but as currently built, I just have a hard time seeing them win it all, which means I think they're going to be really good down the future, like potentially winning the division multiple years in a row, like making playoff runs. And if a couple of things go your way, maybe you make it to an NFC championship game or maybe even a Super Bowl. But I just can't see this Buccaneers team as currently built with this coaching staff winning a championship. So that now brings the question as to how do you get to that point? And I think for starters, maybe firing Todd Bowles in favor of a more offensive heavy coaching staff with proven guys. Like if you can maybe pull over the LA Rams Shula, right? If you can get Shula over to Tampa Bay, like that would be super awesome. And the good thing is you have your quarterback and you have a decent amount of assets to continue to build around this team. I just have a hard time seeing this team win it all right now, which kind of leaves them in like a middle of the road territory where their future isn't bad by no means, but it also isn't super duper bright. If anything, it's more bright than uncertain, but I'm going to put them still in the middle here, in the front row, of course. Next up, the Detroit Lions. And this is a weird one because they got a lot of younger players, but they also have a lot of younger players that are now on their second contract, meaning that they're getting paid the big bucks. And because of that, when you look at their contract situation, it's kind of not great. Like they are not a team that's going to be flooded with cash, just ready to spend in free agency. But I will say this team is super talented. And I do think when they are fully healthy and fully at go, they can win it all. So I'm going to put them in bright still, just because they have a lot of younger pieces that are going to be on this team for the foreseeable future. And, a couple of things go their way, they could be a title contender. Hell, they're a title contender this year. But I'm not going to put them in very bright just because their contract situation is going to get kind of tough within the next few years because of how many major contracts they have. Next up, the Chicago Bears, and I'm going to put them in very, very bright. So when you look at this team, Ben Johnson has done a hell of a job with this roster. I don't think next year they're going to turn into a magical Super Bowl contender or anything like that. But I think 2 to 3 years down the road, if they continue to hit on players in free agency, continue to hit on draft picks, I think that's when you can start really having the conversation about the Chicago Bears, because this team has a lot of things going for it. Number one, you have your franchise quarterback. You took Caleb Williams last year. He looked okay his rookie year. This year, he's taken a nice step forward. Number two, you have your head coach, Ben Johnson, who has been really good for this team, one of the best offensive minds out there. Then in addition to that, you have other really good players, Montez Sweat, Rome Odunze, Colston Loveland. You're still developing Luther Burden. You got some guys in the back end that you feel really good about. This team has some issues defensively they have to figure out. And I think, maybe a new defensive coordinator. I'm not a big fan of Dennis Allen. So maybe you get a new one of those. Maybe some more pieces on the defensive line to be a bit more disruptive, and just getting a bit more healthy on the back end. That's obviously ideal. But this Bears team's got a lot going for them. They should have a decent bit of cash to spend. They have draft assets. They can make some moves there. They don't really need a ton of pieces, but if they can add, again, a running back, maybe a potential Jeremiah Love pick would be awesome for this team. Some back end help in the defense, and you feel pretty good about Chicago moving forward. A team that, a few years ago kind of was more like uncertain in the middle of the road, now is in very bright after one really successful offseason. So shout out to them. Next up, I got San Francisco, and I'm gonna have to put them in middle of the road. Right, just because this is an older football team that is now coming back from a lot of injuries. And I think the question for San Francisco is, can this team just put a season together where every single one of their stars stay healthy? Because if they can, with Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh, like the Niners can totally make a deep playoff run. Because you look at it, Purdy, Kittle, Ricky Pearsall's developing nicely, Jawan Jennings, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. You look on the defense, one that's healthy, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, like that's a great duo. And you got a lot of younger pieces around those guys. Upton Scout, Mustafa, something like that. Renato Green, like there's a lot of younger pieces there to like. Like San Francisco is a really good team, and they have a great front office, a great coaching staff, and this is one of those teams that typically drafts very well. Like they can hit on 3rd or 4th and 5th round picks, and they typically work out. So as they're developing some of these young players, You have a lot of veterans to work with too. Now, if you're asking me their future within like the next 15 years, then yeah, I would probably say it's a bit more uncertain because there are a number of older players that maybe only have a few more years left. Looking at, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Kittle, all those guys, they don't have 10 more years left in them. But you do have your head coach, you should have your quarterback, and you have a lot of super talented pieces around them. So I'll put them in the middle of the road just because the injury question is keeping me from putting them in bright. But with the talent and the names on this team, you can't put them in uncertain or scary or anything like that. All right, moving on, I got the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm going to have to put them in bright, right? I can't put them in very bright just because there is some question marks with the coaching staff, especially with Nick Sirianni. It feels like Eagles fans want this guy fired every single week, and it's kind of funny in my opinion as a Cowboys fan. But the team in general is very, very talented. I think the one issue that Philadelphia has is that it's pretty clear there is some questions with culture over there in terms of A.J. Brown constantly complaining, the Jalen Carter spitting on Dak thing, and kind of some issues with Jalen Carter in general. Like, without a lot of the veterans on this team, the Fletcher Cox, I know Brandon Graham, I guess, is back, but, Brandon Graham, full-time being there, it does feel like that Philadelphia culture is not as strong as it once was. And I think that's a really big deal for Philadelphia. Like, I truly do think that's a huge deal for them. Now, in general, when you look at the roster, if as currently constructed, they continue to just ascend and get better, like, this is a very good football team. Hurts is young. A.J. Brown's not that old. Devontae Smith's young. You're going to have to replace Lane Johnson in the future, but you got Jordan Mailata. You got Dickerson up the middle. There's some things to like here on this team. Saquon only has a few more years left in him realistically, but he's not going to just fall off a cliff. He's still a really productive player. He's not getting the numbers because of him. He's not getting the numbers because of the offensive coordinator. And defensively, like, they're a very young unit. Jalen Carter, Andrew Makuba, Jahad Campbell, Nakobe Dean, like Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, like a very, very young defense that's going to be good for the next couple years. So Philadelphia's in a really good spot. My question for them is, what do they do at head coach and coordinator positions? All right, next up, Las Vegas. I got to put it in scary future. This team has so many major issues on big time positions. Quarterback, they need help. They need a wide receiver one. They need multiple offensive linemen. There's head coach question marks. Defensively, do they have an interior defensive lineman that you feel good about? It was supposed to be Christian Wilkins. That did not work out. You need help in the linebacking core. You need help in the secondary. So much stuff needs to change here, and it's going to start this year. I think they're going to hit another reset button after kind of hitting the reset button this offseason when they fired their head coach, hired a new one, and then brought in Geno Smith. And instead of finding stability, it's been anything but that. Now you have an older quarterback, an older head coach, and you stink. The only thing that keeps them, I guess, afloat is they're going to have good draft picks this year, but man, it's not very good for this team. All right, up next is the Green Bay Packers, and I'm going to put them in bright. I'm going to put them kind of in the middle here. I'll just throw them in the back end here. This is in no particular order, but Green Bay's got a lot of things going for them. They're a fairly young roster with a lot of really talented pieces. You have your quarterback. You have your head coach. You have multiple positions down. You're going to expect other younger players to continue to develop, but you got Micah, you got Xavier McKinney. We'll see what they do at linebacker with Quay Walker, because I believe he's a free agent, but you have Edrin Cooper. There's a lot to like about this Packers team. The real question for them is just, can they, take that big step forward to being a title contender, or are they always just going to be like a true playoff team? We'll have to figure that out. Plus, the division is loaded with talent, so it's always going to be difficult to win the division, but I think the Packers are right there with the Lions and the Bears and even the Vikings if they can find a quarterback. I think the Packers are in a really good spot. Next up, I got Washington, and I'm going to have to throw them in uncertain just because I can't put them in scary because they have their franchise quarterback. Like, Jaden Daniels is their guy, and I think they're going to give Dan Quinn another year, so they at least have their head coach for now. But when you look at the roster, there's going to be a lot of turnover these next few years with some of these older players retiring or going elsewhere. We're talking Von Miller, Marshawn Lattimore, Bobby Wagner, some guys all across the team, like Terry McLaurin's in his 30s, Deebo Samuel's getting up there with age, Zach Ertz, Laramie Tunsil's not no spring chicken. Like, they have a lot of things they're going to have to figure out these next few years, but you have your head coach for now, and you have your quarterback. And so that gives me, keeps me away from being in scary. But with all that said, they're going to have to figure it out, because when you look at that team, it's It's quite interesting to say the least. Next up, Arizona, and I'm gonna have to do the same thing here with Washington. I'm gonna put them in uncertain. Look, Kyler Murray's gonna be off the team probably this year. I mean, they're gonna have to probably try and find a trade partner. I think Kyler will have some suitors out there. I just don't think it's with the Arizona Cardinals, and they might fire their head coach, Jonathan Gannon. With that said, I don't put them in scary future because when you look at the actual roster, it's really not that bad. Like, there's a lot of pieces to work with. And if you bring in a new coaching staff, you bring in a new quarterback, like I truly do believe if you hit on coach and on quarterback, you're looking at Arizona getting right back into the conversation to make the playoffs because it's a very talented unit. Marvin Harrison, Will Johnson, Walter Nolan, a lot of guys in the defensive line, Josh Sweat, Max Melton, Michael Wilson's having a great year, Trey McBride, Trey Benson, Paris Johnson Jr. Like, we can just keep going down the list. Buda Baker. Like, there's a lot of pieces here to work with. It's just you need a head coach and a quarterback change. And I think that'll happen probably this offseason or next one. So they're in uncertain just because if you miss again on quarterback and head coach, then you had to hit the reset button again. And how much longer can you realistically do that? But in terms of the roster outside of head coach and quarterback, it's actually pretty freaking good. Next up, I got Pittsburgh, and I'm gonna have to put them in I'll put them in uncertain. Kind of an older roster with a good mix of younger players too, but realistically speaking, Rodgers probably will retire after this season. How much longer does TJ Watt have in him? How much longer does Cam Hayward have in him? How many more years of in his prime Jalen Ramsey does he have? Like, a lot of your big name guys who have been really good the past few years or were brought in, like, you know, Ramsey and Slay, how much longer do they have? And when you look at some of the younger pieces, especially on the offense, haven't really worked out so far. Like, the offensive line, while you have some younger guys in the interior, and, you know, Fontenot has looked okay at moments, but like Broderick Jones hasn't really worked out to the full extent. You drafted Caleb Johnson this year, and I mean, he hasn't done nothing for you this year. Your wide receiver one is DK Metcalf, and DK is not this spring chicken. He's getting up there in age. So when you look at it, you think you have your head coach in Mike Tomlin. I know Steelers fans are probably a little sick of him at this point, but realistically speaking, he's a good head coach. So you have Tomlin, but you're going to need a new quarterback again for what feels like the 5th straight year in a row. Ever since Ben Roethlisberger's been retired, the Steelers have just been kind of just flopping around, picking quarterback after quarterback. But there's going to be a lot of, I guess, I'm going to keep saying the word here, a lot of resetting on this team, a lot of turnover with some of these older players, and a lot of impact amazing players. Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, like 2 of your best players on your team. Jalen Ramsey, same thing. You're going to have to figure that out. I'm not saying they retired this year, but 2 to 3 years down the road, realistically speaking, they might be retired by then. Next up, I got Buffalo. I'm going to have to put them in middle of the road, kind of right here with the Baltimore Ravens. As long as you have Josh Allen, you're always going to be in contention. But when you look at the roster, this roster does have some like real issues with it. Like, they need a true wide receiver one. Like, without Stephon Diggs there, that receiving core has just not been good enough. The offensive line's also, you know, pretty decent, but there's, you know, Deion Dawkins is not getting any younger. There's also questions with Sean McDermott. Does he stick around or does he get fired? And defensively speaking, it hasn't been the greatest of units this year. Still, you know, I lean it more towards bright than, you know, uncertain, kind of like Baltimore here, but I'm just going to put them in middle of the road because they will be contending for titles. They can contend this year, but realistically speaking, the roster has some things they have to figure out in the future. Next up, Atlanta, scary future, man. And that's crazy to think about because just last year, I probably would have put them in like bright to middle of the road, but this year has been a disaster for the team. When you look at this roster, they don't have a first-round pick this year, despite being potentially having a top 10 pick. Your quarterback, who already has a massive injury history, just had, and I think it's a partially torn ACL or something. It's season ending, which is bad. And the team in general, while very, very talented, has some question marks about what their future young pieces are going to do. Like, what is Jalen Walker going to turn into? What is James Pierce Jr. going to turn into? Do we keep Kyle Pitts, right? The only young players that you feel really good about the future would be Terrell, London, and Bijan, and a few other pieces here and there. But you're going to fire your head coach more than likely. You're probably going to have to reset at quarterback. Oh, and you have Kirk Cousins under contract for, I think, 2 more years, which he's making a lot of money. So they're in a tough spot, and they don't have a first-round pick this year. So I don't know what they do at quarterback. I don't know what this team does in general. They might be a suitor for Kyler Murray. Like, maybe they trade Penix and Kirk for Kyler. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what the Falcons do this offseason, because they're going to be a team that's going to have a lot of changes this year, front office-wise, coaching-wise, and just team-wise, because they've made some questionable decisions, to say the least. Next up, Seattle. I got to put them in very bright. It's a relatively young team, but they also have some good vets that aren't going to retire anytime soon. They got multiple years still left in them. Like, you know, for example, Leonard Williams, DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, those guys have years still on them. You know, they're going to have to probably replace Cooper Kupp, but you just brought in Shaheed. You already have JSN, and JSN, boy, he's going to earn himself a paycheck my days. He's going to get himself a bag. He's having a hell of a year. But you have a quarterback who's not making a ton of money. Like, Sam Darnold's contract is actually very workable, and you have a lot of young pieces surrounding him. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Shaheed's a little bit older, but he's still got plenty of years left in him. You know, Elijah Arroyo, your offensive line, Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Gray Zabel. Like, there's a lot of things to like here. And defensively, the same exact story. You got a good mix of veterans with young players like Nicky Monwari, Devon Witherspoon, Byron Murphy. I can keep going down the list. Josh Jobe. Like, there's a lot to like about the Seahawks team. Oh, and you have one of the best head coaches in football. Seattle is built to succeed, and they might win a championship this year. I don't think they will, but they are definitely going to be in the playoffs, and they might have a chance. So shout out to the Seahawks, man. Next, the Patriots, back-to-back, very bright. The Patriots, man, you have one of the best head coaches in football, and you have one of the best young quarterbacks in football. I think if you were to ask the Patriots, would you trade Mike Vrabel and Drake May for any other head coach and quarterback combination, would you do it? I think the answer would be no. Even Andy Reid and Mahomes, I don't think the Patriots would do it. Now, Mahomes is Mahomes, right? You can't deny that. But with the Patriots, with the way they're building this team, like Drake May and Mike Vrabel is so perfect for this roster. Just so perfect, right? And you look at the roster, they did a good job of finding these really good veterans to keep them afloat and get this team heading in the right direction. And obviously, Drake May has just taken a huge step forward. So now they're like legit playoff threats. But you got some younger players too. Christian Gonzalez, Will Campbell, their left guard, who I'm blanking on his name, but the guy from Georgia. You got some young receivers you like a lot too. You got some young backs as well. There's a lot of good players in the defensive side of things. They have draft capital. They have plenty of money. Like, this Patriots team is just in such a good spot roster-wise. And realistically speaking, they could win it all this year, or probably more than likely not, but they will make a run next year or the year after. They look really good in theory. Next up, Cleveland Browns. Man, it's tough to really put them on the board here because we just saw Shador play for the first time. We've already seen Dylan. I'm going to have to put them in uncertain just because I don't know if Stefanski at this point is going to be the head coach next year. And if Shador doesn't play well, like really well the rest of the way, then I do think there's a chance they potentially reset at quarterback. The only reason why they're not in scary, despite having head coach and quarterback questions, there's some pieces to like here, and they do have 2 first-round picks this year, right? Now, the Deshaun Watson thing is definitely looming large, but you only have to deal with that for, I think, 2 more years. So after that, you just let Deshaun Watson leave, and you know, you just kick him out the door and say goodbye. But assuming that they keep Stefanski and maybe they draft a quarterback this year, there is a lot to like about this Browns team. Like, they have some really talented pieces. Now, their contract situation is not ideal, but again, I think there's something with Deshaun's contract they can figure out. So the Browns are not totally screwed. That's why they're not in scary future, but they're also not like up here. They're more somewhere in this mix. So I'll put them here. All right, next up, the Houston Texans. I'm gonna have to put them in bright. I still think there's a lot to like about this Texans team. I like DeMeco Ryans. I like their defense, obviously. I still think Stroud is a good quarterback. They just got to shore up this offensive line, right? Realistically speaking, they need to put every single resource they have, draft capital, whatever money they might have, to rebuilding this line. We saw the Bears do it in one offseason where they went from one of the worst offensive lines to being actually like legitimately good this year. The Texans need to do the exact same thing. Make aggressive trades, aggressive signings, aggressive draft decisions to build this offensive line because you have to protect CJ Stroud. And if you can start to do that, you have the defense and you have the playmakers. There's a lot to like about this team, but you got to build that offensive line. I think they should go all in this year. And if they listen to me, then I like where they're going to head. Next up, Kansas City. I'm going to have to put them in middle of the road. Look, Andy Reid, how much longer does he realistically have like coaching wise? I don't know if it's much longer. Like, I don't think he retires this year, but if he does, it wouldn't surprise me. We already know that Kelsey's probably on his way out as well. Yes, you have Patrick Mahomes, but I mean, Mahomes is now, what, is he in his 30s now? Like, he's in his 30s, not saying he's going to fall off a cliff or anything like that. But we have seen Mahomes not be his best version this year. He still does Mahomes things here and there, but he hasn't been as dominant as what he once was. And a lot of the key guys who have been on this team for the past several Super Bowl runs are now getting up there in age, and there's going to be some decent bit of turnover and roster resetting. And if Andy Reid does retire, then obviously that's a huge issue for this team, because Andy's been one of the key factors for them even being good in the first place for all those years with Alex Smith, and now being incredible with Patrick Mahomes. Losing Andy Reid would be tough for this team. I don't know if it happens this year, but it definitely feels like he's on his way out soon, right? Sooner rather than later. Still, they're right here in the middle with all these three AFC teams, because they're going to be good. They're going to contend for titles. Hell, every single team in this middle of the road are going to be good. They just have some question marks they have to figure out. And if they can figure it out, then okay, we're back up here and here. But until then, got to put them right here for now. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. Man, the turnaround this year has actually been quite fun. I'm a Cowboys fan, but I'll be unbiased here. I think if you had asked me at the start of the season, I probably would have put us in like uncertain. But the Quinnen Williams trade has been really good so far, and I was a big fan of the trade in the first place. And you have 2 first-round picks this year. If you bring back George Pickens, I actually like where this team is. I'm going to put them in middle of the road, though, because I can't quite put them in bright or very bright. But I'm going to put them in middle of the road. And here's why. You have your franchise quarterback. Yes, he's making a shit ton of money, but you have him. You think you have your head coach in Brian Schottenheimer, who's been really good this year. You have George Pickens. You have CeeDee Lamb. Hopefully, you can bring back Javonte Williams. Your young offensive line has taken some nice steps forward this year. And defensively speaking, there's a lot to like about this defense. Now, it's not great this year, and it's not going to be great the rest of the way, but you have Quinnen Williams, who you obviously like. You have Donovan Ezeraku, who's developing nicely. You have Osa Digizua, who's benefiting a ton from Quinnen Williams. You have DeMarvion Overshown. You have Savon Ravel. You have Kalen Carson. You have Deron Bland. You need to reset your safety room, and you probably need another top-tier corner. But you have 2 first-round picks this year, so you realistically could make those moves. And Dallas does have some contracts they could shed off to open up a bit of cap space for free agency, although Dallas is usually very not aggressive in free agency. They could shed off deals like Trevon Diggs, Kenny Clark, Terrence Steele. Maybe you restructure a big-time contract. There's things they could do to open up some salary cap. But still, I think Dallas is heading into a nice spot. I can't put them in bright because their salary cap is really tight, and they don't have another draft pick until the 4th round after their 2 firsts, so I can't put them up here. But I'm going to put them right here. Like, I think they're firmly in the mix with these other teams, and I think next year or the year after, like Dallas is going to be in the conversation as one of the, potential favorites to win the NFC East and make potentially a deep playoff run. Like, Dallas is in a good spot here. All right, next up, the Chargers. I'm going to put them in brights. The injury concerns on the offensive line, hopefully it's just a 1-year issue, because look at the team. It's actually really, really good. My question now is going to be, does their defensive coordinator get a head coaching job, Jesse Minter? And if he does, who do you replace him with? Because he's a really good defensive mind. The defense hasn't been as good this year. I don't think that's really his fault. They need to address defense heavily this offseason, but they have a little bit of some money to work with this offseason. They got a lot of young pieces, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Rashawn Slater's not that old. Herbert's still very young. Like, there's a lot of things to like about this team, and I like your head coach a lot. The question will be, can you shore up this defense a bit more, add more pieces to the defensive line, more pieces in the secondary, and can this offensive line stay healthy, right? And can you fix up maybe like a center or a guard issue? So other than that, though, they got a lot of things to work with. Next up, the Jets, and I'm going to put their future in. It's tough because they have so many draft picks to work with, but the question is going to be, can the Jets hit on their draft picks, right? Because the roster right now isn't great, but there's things to like about it. I'm going to put them in bright. I'll put them in bright just because when you look at this team, they have their 2 top tackles already set in place. You have some guys in the interior you feel good about. You have Garrett Wilson. You're trying out Adonai Mitchell. You have Mason Taylor. You have Breece Hall. And defensively, you're going to need a lot of work on that side, but you have the draft assets to make it work. And I think Aaron Glenn's doing a decent job as the head coach, and clearly there's some trust there. The culture is being built back up. There's some things to like about the Jets, right? I can't put them in very bright because they have to hit on their 1st-round picks, but assuming they hit on it and they get a new quarterback in the building, potentially this year or next year, there's a lot to like. Now, their version of bright is very different than like a Detroit, LA, or Philadelphia, or Green Bay, or basically every team besides like the Giants here. Their bright is that they have so many assets to work with in the future that they can reset the roster properly and actually build for a super bright future. Moving on, I got the Carolina Panthers, and I'm going to put them in I'm gonna put them in bright just because the Bryce Young conversation is very real. But at the same time, there's some things about this team you really like. Rico Dowell, Tetairoa McMillan. I think Dave Canales has done a fine job. Defensively, they've taken a massive step forward this year. The question really does come down to Bryce Young. Like, is he the guy? Because if he's not the guy, then you're probably looking a bit more right here. So you know what? In fact, because quarterback is so important, I'm actually going to put them in uncertain. I know it's like a big drop off here, but with Bryce Young not really being always there, right? Being so up and down and usually down. Yeah, I mean, they might have to reset the quarterback room. And if they do, that's a big time question mark as to how they address that spot. Regardless, though, they have a bit of money to spend. They have draft picks. Like, they have things to build on, but the quarterback position is so important. They have to figure that out. All right, next up, the Titans. I'm going to have to put them in uncertain too. You just fired your head coach. You have your young quarterback. Other than that, a lot of things to rebuild this year. Like, you have Jeffrey Simmons, you have Pollard, you have Tyjae Spears, you have some receivers you like Gunnar Helm as well. But the offensive line has been bad. The defense has been bad. Like, there's a lot of things to fix here in Tennessee, so I'll put them in uncertain. Next up, Indianapolis. I'm going to put them in top of bright, bordering on very bright, just because I don't want to overreact to this start to their season. Like, they're having a really good year, but if they crumble down the rest of the way, there's going to be a lot of questions to answer on this team. The biggest one they're going to have to answer this offseason, do they pay Daniel Jones, right? Or do they try and move off of him and find a potential upgrade? I think they will pay Daniel Jones, assuming he continues to play well. My question is, with Daniel Jones, can you win a championship? That's going to be the question they have to answer this year and in future years. All right, and lastly, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the weirdest teams ever to talk about. I never really know where to put them on these lists. It's obviously not scary future. Maybe it's middle of the road. I'll put them in middle of the road because I like their head coach. I like a lot of pieces on this team, but Trevor Lawrence to me just is such a massive question mark, right? And I think he's going to get one more year to prove his worth. But if you look at this Jaguars team, they don't have a first round pick this year because they made the big move for Travis Hunter. And I wouldn't say they're regretting it, but I also wouldn't say they're loving what they've got from him this year because the injury, not knowing what position he plays, like that's a huge question mark they have to answer this offseason. But there's still a lot to like about this team, and they're clearly heading in the right direction. And shoot, they might make the playoffs this year, which is a nice turnaround, but I can't put them anywhere higher than this. Like they're more here and here, more so than here and here. So I'll put them in the back of middle of the road. But you guys let me know in the comment section below. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with my list? And if you enjoyed, hit that like and subscribe button. I love you guys. Peace.